Hello, welcome to another Red9 demo. This is quite an important one because today what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to attach external rigs to the Red9 Puppet system. And that's quite a key breach, because what it means is that we've always said you don't need to necessarily use a Red9 Puppet to get the best out of ProPack, but we've never really shown you how to do this. So stay with us. We're going to go through both body and facial. So I've loaded up our de facto rigging. And if I open up the MetaNode UI, which is this thing here, these are all the nodes that we have in our system. And we've got a lot of nodes in the system. If I were to graph that network, you get this massive network of wires. And that's what they are. They're effectively wires that hook up to the controllers that we use to find the data that we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete all of those, effectively removing this and returning this rig back to just a standard transform node with no metadata information in it whatsoever. Now then, if I open up our ProPack Rig Manager, which is this one here, you'll see everything's red. It finds nothing in the scene. There's nothing there for it to find, and that's the open UI, by the way. So what I'm going to do is, excuse me, I'm going to connect a fresh node, and we get three options. The first one is character SRC. Now this is only relevant if you're working with us and we're building puppet rigs for you. This is the SRC file that we send, or that we marker up. And effectively it's the skinning, the skeleton, the deformation, and any additional controllers for that character that we consume and bind into the rig. So if you're wiring external rigs, ignore that one. These are the two that we're going to be talking about: Pro MetaRig external and Pro MetaRig facial UI. Obviously that one's intended for facial, the external is intended for rigs and props and anything else that you want to wire to the systems. And they emit two different sets of code bases. So like I say, if you're doing facial, stick with us. Okay, so we've made the node, and what we're going to do is we're just going to marker up some of these nodes. So the first thing is CTRL main. This is crucial. Every rig needs one, and that is effectively the root controller of that rig. That's all it is. Locomotion controller, well, that is generally this thing down here, which for games, this is a games rig. For games, that would be the world point, you know, the world locomotion route joint. So I'm just going to mark that up. Okay. If I select controllers, it'll select, but it's only selecting this because this is all it knows about at the moment. So what we're going to do is we'll jog off that, come to something like that, grab all of that lot, get rid of that, and we'll add controllers. So these are adding controllers to the rig as to that one node. This is really important. Do not ever change that. If you, the CTRL is a marker in the systems to denote that I am a controller. Okay, and the node name is basically, this will name it the same as the actual controller itself. Okay, so leave that and we just go yes. Everything's wired up, connected. So if I now do that, it will select all of the controllers within the rig. Lots of bits and bobs. Okay, now let's mark it for export, because I'm going to do this for a game. So we'll call this Puppet. I've just selected the export route there. That's it for the control systems. For the rig manager, what we're going to do is we will do the same thing. Now, there is another one here, skeleton root. We use that to denote the root of the skeleton of the rig. It doesn't necessarily matter that much. There's not a huge amount of code uses it, but it's there for that purpose. And then models. Models would be any meshes that effectively would go out for your bind pose. So it's all of the models for that character. Ignore the head meshes. We'll get to that. Obviously, that's for the facial stuff. And then finally, what we're going to do is we're going to save the zero pose and the attribute map. And that's basically it. Okay, it's that easy. If I now hover over any of these, you'll see we now have a custom marking menu that comes up where we can select the rig controllers, we can key the rig controllers, we can select the systems, etc. We can zero the rigs off. The zero pose is just that. If I were to do right click, zero rig, it will zero it. It's effectively a pose that we pickle and we store on the node itself. And it doesn't have to be zero, it can have whatever data you want within it. The attribute map is quite useful. The attribute map basically, stores the condition of every node within the rig. And by that I mean the lock state, whether it's accessible to the channel box, etc., etc. Because half the time, you know, if you're a rigger, you lock everything. You see there's not a lot in the channel box there. Everything's locked out of the way, so animators can't destroy them. But as a rigger, sometimes it's useful to be able to just go in and unlock the entirety of everything, so everything is now unlocked. Well, that's great, but now I want to get back to the point where I give it to the animator and reset the channels. All I've got to do is load the attribute map in, everything gets reset to where it was. So that's quite a useful one as well. On top of that, we also now expand to timecode. So on this rig now, we've got the ability to, in fact, before we do that, we've missed out the filter priorities. This is actually quite an important feature. If I right click, we have pose, and like the animation pose library in here, the animation toolkit, I should say, like the pose library, MRig respects this idea of relative poses and relative animation. They both use the same internal data. And the problem is, if I were to do this, let's just go back to there, I can select a node and go pose load relative to that node I've got selected. Now I would expect to see him sat down over that controller, but he doesn't, he explodes. And this harks back to a video that I did, I can't remember, it's one of these, I think it's a hierarchy control, way back when we first started doing Studio Pack. And that is that the way we do the systems is that we go through, we load the pose where it was, and then we reset all the world transforms back to this new position. We recalculate them all. But the problem with that is you've got to do it in the right order. You've got to apply it in the right order, otherwise you get this double transform, which is exactly what's happened here. We've double transformed everything. So let's do that again. Go back to T-pose, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to select the cog, because it's in world space. I'm going to select both risk, there we go, cog, wrist controller, foot controller. Might be that the poles need doing as well. I'm going to add those to the priority list. And now when we do that, and we go cache pose, and we go back to here, for example, and we go load cache relative, it now works. And that's all it is. It's an order stack of what gets processed. Basically, whatever's in these, that will get processed first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and then everything else gets processed after that. And you only need to add things that really are in world space. Things like the hips, the chest, for example. Well, it's a child of the cog. So as long as the cog's in the right place, it doesn't matter what happens with the hips. They're going to be in the right place regardless. So that's the idea there, and we can bump these up and down, etc., etc. Okay, so that's that. Now then, exposing to Pro basically means that now all of these animation systems, if I were to load some of these up, so the redirector, we've got the anim load save systems, all of these things which by default used to, and still do really, rely on this hierarchy control, now bypass it. They don't need this hierarchy control, because what we've done by doing this is that we've bound all of this hierarchy control directly onto the rig itself, so it carries along with it its own settings. As long as this thing is set to Red9 Dev Rig, it will work, it'll pick it up. And that's the same for facial, same for everything else. It all knows about the systems now. So just by marking those up, we've exposed it effectively and properly to the redirector, to the anim map systems, to the exporter as well. So the export, you remember what we did, we marked that skeleton up. I can add to this thing, and I can go, let's say walk, and let's do, I can't remember what it was, 0 to about 22 I think is a walk on this thing, something like that. Save, let's have a look, marker, there's my walk sequence. And I can do, this is Perforce Manager as well, by the way. The exporter, I don't want to dwell, I just want to kind of show you, expose it to it. FBX skeleton is just that, it will output purely skeleton clean data. There's all sorts of settings in here, again, not going to go through it too much. R9 anim and Perforce Manager. So basically, if I now hit that button, it will generate an R9 anim, it will generate an FBX, and it will generate all of that inside Perforce and check it out for me, I should say. So again, it exposes all of this stuff. That will go through in a complete separate video, but I just wanted to go through that. And then the other thing is that, again, being exposed to Pro, being exposed correctly to the metadata exposes all of these things. So if you've hooked a scene up with the exporter, I can now batch them, because I can effectively come into the browser, select a load of stuff, go export to FBX, and let it get on with it. So really simply, just wiring it exposes all of this stuff. And we also have additional functionality down here for inserting padding, and again, this respects MRigs, it all knows about MRigs. And then the other one, which is really important, particularly for performance capture, and again, this leads on to the facial that we'll do in a second, it exposed the timecode system. So ProPack has this idea of timecode, and a lot of the tools respect timecode, and they use it in the way that they set data and they load data up. So I'm going to just go on this, so timecode set rig timecode, we'll set it to be 01 at that frame there, set, and I can either, on the rig itself, I can either come down here and go timecode connect, or I can open up the Timecode Manager, which is the one that does all of the goodies, and again, there are help files on this, by all means look at them. I can connect to that rig, connect that one, connect to, which opens that up, and there we go, there's the timecode loaded on that system. Now, by having timecode, it means that I can sync WAVs to that timecode. It also means that when I load animation data, the anim respects the timecode, and it can be loaded against another rig with the same timecode, and it figure out where to sync the data to. So again, it's a massive deal, and all of that is literally just by a few clicks on this to get that all up and running. If we look at the systems now, what we've got is we've now got the export. Sorry, we've got the Pro external rig, which is a rig that we wired. Because we set an export node, this thing here, there is the export tag, and there's the export loop, which is that one loop, that little walk sequence that we did. And because I've connected timecode, we've got timecode HUD. And if I just right click on that and go delete, that will get rid of the timecode HUD. It's just a throwaway node that holds the systems that are being shown. Actually, one thing we did miss off, by wiring it to the external mrig node, what we've also done is we've exposed it to the picker. And the picker is our custom picker for picking things. And obviously at the moment this thing knows nothing about it. We deleted all our default Red9 stuff and we've just wired it to a completely fresh node. So as you'd expect, this is completely empty. But if I come into edit mode, I'll just undock that. Into edit mode, we can set the background, we can do all sorts, we can add new background, new tabs, new views, but I can easily add, if I go right click, add rig controller. There's the list of controllers currently wound to this system. These are all the ones wired to that external node that we just did. So let's add the chest, and we're going to make it a yellow dot, and we'll add that one. I'll put it there. Main controller. Now let's do a wrist. Right wrist. Right wrist is red. Excuse me. Drop it down there. Left wrist. Left wrist is blue. You get the idea. We can really easily just line these up, and we can select two, line them up horizontally, line them vertically. We can constrain them to all sorts. We can reset the sizes. If I want to set the size of that to be bigger, obviously you can manually do whatever size you want within these things. And with a little bit of, well, not a great deal of effort, you can get a full-on picker that does everything. Now then, we can also add custom buttons. So I'm going to add a custom button, and we'll call it stuff. I don't know, pick an ID, red square, that'll do, whatever that happens to be. And within that, I can come into the editor, and I can put whatever command I want on that button. So I've added a button that has a custom command, and it's going to do whatever I want it to do. Every button also has actions. So when you right click, the actions get triggered, and I can put a new action in there. I can call it whatever I want. Do stuff. I'm not going to bother putting a command in there, but now when I come out of edit mode particularly, there will be a thing called do stuff down here when I come out of edit mode. We can also bind poses up. Again, really simple. If I select something in the animation UI as a pose, and I hit the pose button, that gets baked and put in as a little icon up there. There's all sorts of stuff. It's a really powerful system for generating these sort of things. And if I come out of edit mode now, there we go. It's also dynamic. So when I select in here, it selects in here. If I select in here, it's a full selection highlight. It selects itself, vice versa. And the other thing is this is stored within the rig itself, so that end node has all this data cached onto it, and you can save them out to file if you want and load them off onto other things. So again, that's really useful for custom views. Okay, let's move on to facial. Okay, same thing again. This is our base Red9 facial rig, or a facial rig that we've done for a client in the past. Incidentally, the data running off this is all talkback. So we've not really talked much about talkback. Talkback is a new service we're going to be doing, and it's basically automated lip syncing from WAV. You deliver the WAV, we do the lip syncing, but it's really accurate. And this is. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog and the cow. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog and the cow. But anyway, I digress. But that is pure automated lip syncing. And as you can see, by refreshing this again, we've got no mrigs in the scene. There's nothing in there for us to know about. So we're going to hit the button like we did last time. This one clearly is a facial rig, so we're going to hit the facial one. There's a few differences in here because the facial rig needs some extra stuff. Again, we've got C2L main, which is the root wire for the rig. So in our case, we've got facial board, and we'll wire that up. We've got some joints, so I'm going to set the chest joint, which is there, connect chest joint. And then generally, when we're doing facial, we normally have a holder joint, which just holds all the face joints. So we're going to hold the facial joint, and we're just going to connect that up. Okay. Off it goes, connects everything in. Now then, we still haven't given it actually any controls, so we'll just give it that lot there. Controls, yes, same. You'll notice this time it's not CTRL, it's face CTRL, and there's a very good reason for that. We separate the way the nodes find it, and that's so that if you've got a body rig and a facial rig wired together, excuse me, we can identify the two more easily. So that wires all those up. Now then, you don't necessarily have to add an export tag. I'm going to add one anyway, because I don't intend to export this. Normally with a facial we would export R9 anim data and the clients would load that back in, because the R9 anim data also propagates the audio and it propagates the sync. And again, like we've just shown with the timecode, we can sync it and load it against the rig's timecode. So it works really well across complex systems. So we've wired those up. Let's have a look. We'll load the zero pose up. We'll just save those off. Save like we did before. And now we'll do the mesh and the render meshes. So if we do the render meshes, is everything to do with that head, which would be all the teeth, all the eyes and the head, render meshes, and the head mesh is that one, which is just the head mesh. That's used in a number of cases. For isolating things, we use it for the mapping and for all the code that we use for sculpting, etc. But again, it's external, so not hugely relevant. Filter priorities, in this case it makes no difference. None of these are parity to anybody else. It's all a flat structure, so we don't really need to set that up. And again, we're done. You'll also notice that we missed last time this health manager. This binds directly to the health manager systems, and again we have tests for making sure that everything in the delivery is correct. These are the kind of things that we usually, either we help clients write so they know how to write them and they do their own, or we'll supply. And it's really worth noting, because for example when we deliver a facial rig, we will have one of these and it will have to pass every test. If it doesn't, it'll tell us what's gone wrong, and we can go away and fix it, or we can use the fix method. So again, it's all bound to the MRig, and the health methods are expecting an MRig usually. Okay, so we just wind that up, and again, being facial, we'd expect a few extra bits. So if we right click on there, same thing, zero, select, we can do all of these things. But we've also got a head instancer, which if I go down we can create, which gives us this for nice fast play blasting, and we've got instances of the head. If I delete the head instancer input, we've also got mesh panels, so I can create a head mesh panel, which is that one. I can create a control panel, and then it doesn't matter where my rig is, what happens to the rig, what part of the cutscene. This is isolated to these models. This is isolated to the render meshes that we wire to this character. And this is isolated to the CTRL mains. This is the main controller. And again, these are just floating viewports really, but if this character's running and whatever, you've got a nice isolated view. It also knows about the head instancer. If we were to do that and we were to do right click, head instancer, reframe, it will reframe it because it knows about the meshes. So it's really useful little custom tools in there. There are some extras. We've got get eyes, get hips, these are really just examples of stuff that you can expand with, but it's really, really easy to expand these things. And again, like I say, there we go, we've got the time code for that rig, and we can just set the rig time code. And if this were to match a piece of body data, we've now got time code on the rig that we can go away and mark those datas with. And obviously it exposes the pose savers. So again, if we wanted to just really quickly set a pose on this thing, we can, as long as we've got this thing set to Pro, this one here, to the dev rig, and I can just do any old pose. Incidentally, the pose stuff will also blend. So if let's just get rid of that head instancer, delete. Oops, did I delete it? No, I didn't. Head instancer, delete. What's going on? Head instancer, delete. Thank you, Mo. The pose is cached as before, so cache current pose, and I can come back to here and I can just right click and load the cache, load current, etc. It also works as a blendable, so if you've got it in a pose library, we've just set this up here and I can just save it up. What I can do is right click, pose blend. I didn't actually, I did that off a different rig. Ignore me. It does work, honestly, it's just that was set up on the base rig, not on this particular rig. And then finally, what else this expands on is the actual idea of metadata. So if you're getting into code, there is this thing here, Red9 API docs. Let's open that up. There's two chunks to this. One is a studio pack, which is the open source, and that's the core of everything. That's what everything runs off. There's metadata there. And then ProPack is obviously the expanded systems, and there's the metadata, and those are all the functions, etc. that we've got in this. It's a big library. There's all sorts of handling for export tags and audio handling and audio nodes. This concept of an audio group that you can bolt audio onto a character so you know who's saying what. Again, it's all in there. And the code is so simple, and this is the beauty of it. Literally, to get this rig all I need to do is that. So I've imported metadata, which is the Studio Pack version of it. I've gone, get me the rigs, give me the first instance of the rig in the scene. There's my facial UI rig. And off that is everything. So I can go pose. There's a pose load, pose store, pose cache. We have a pose compare, so you can validate whether a rig is at the same state as another one. I can go load, save animations, all the animation calls are all there. Again, these are all bound, so just to make things easier. You'll also notice all these face controls. So face controls, oops, face CTRL, let's have one jaw control. There's my jaw control on the rig. So what it's doing is it's finding the M rig, it's walking the network to try and find the controller marked as that. And then we can also do things like get children. Again, there's tons of help on this. All you've got to do is look on the site. There's an awful lot of documentation in these things as well. So there's my rig. I can set keys up. It's all bound, including the timecode. The timecode class is exposed. There's the timecode, all there for ease of use, etc. So hopefully that kind of takes a bit of the fear away. Like I say, ProPack. Yes, we'd love everybody to use our facial rigs and our body rigs, but we're more than aware that studios won't. You've all spent time developing your own systems. The last thing is that, let me just get into this. If I get the code base, Red9, okay. So if I come into the code base, inside ProPack, you'll see a dev kit. First thing you've got is completion. Completion is the auto stubs. These are basically, you can import these into your Wing, Eclipse, whatever you're using, PyCharm, and they're just auto-complete stubs. ProPack is compiled. It's compiled code, so you don't get the standard completion. So by importing those, it gives you all the completion benefits. The other one is this, wire meta nodes. If I open that thing up, this is effectively an example class of how to wire the rig properly. So what we've just done is we've wired it to a single node, to a single export, to a single external rig node, which gives you the majority of the functionality. Your FKIK isn't going to work because we have no idea about the state of all your nodes inside the rig. And this one just goes through how to do that. This is a macro that we've written for another client. Obviously, I've changed the names of everything out. But this was done as an example of how to go away and complete some of the system. So you can see some of the way that we're building it and the networks. By all means use it, wire the macros up yourself. The more people that use it, the better, the more powerful it'll become, but it's a very powerful back-end structures. And literally it's all by just doing a few clicks inside this thing here. Click, 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 took me a couple of seconds and it's done. The last thing that we haven't gone through, which again is exposed through all of this stuff, is we've got full mirroring and full support for symmetry within this stuff. And again, that stuff you need to set up. We have the mirror setup from Studio Pack. In that macro, it will show you, you'll see some of these things. Everything gets given a mirror data slot, so you've got slot left and it's slot 3, and some of the axes that get set up. Once that's set up, you can do all sorts. Again, I can select these things and I can, where are we, what am I doing? Why can't I get those trace forms? There we go. Something horrible, I can, symmetry left to right. No, I didn't do it. Oh, I haven't got it set up because I stripped everything off. Obviously won't work on that. But, there is symmetry, there is mirroring, all of that side of stuff. Okay, if you've got any questions, by all means, ping us. Love to hear from you. Thanks very much. Bye.